Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, we're asking how many out-of-school colleges seniors have applied to, and we surveyed 100 people and got the results.
Oh, hi. Our sampling type was a convenience voluntary sample, and we did this by posting a Google form.
So these are measures of central tendency and spread, as well as the variance and the standard deviation for our data set. And the mode is the most common number that occurs in the data set, which first was 0. And then the median is the middle number of both halves of the data set, and first that was 1. And then the mean is the average of the data set, where you add up all the numbers and divide by how many numbers there are, which first was 1.4. And then the Q1 is the median of the lower half of the data set, and first that was 0. And then the Q3 is the median of the upper half of the data set, which first was 2. And then the interquartile range is Q3 minus Q1, so for us 2 minus 0, which gives us 2 for our IQR. And then the range is the max minus the min, and our max was 8 and our min was 0, so our range was 8. And then the mid-range is the max plus min divided by 2, so for us it was 8 plus 0 divided by 2, which gave us 4 for the mid-range. And then for the variance, you subtract the mean from each data point, square each of those numbers, and add them all up and divide by the number of data points that there are. And so for that we got 3.24, and then to find the standard deviation, you take the square root of the variance, which for us was 1.8.
Standard deviation and variance are both measures of spread. Variance is the measure of the average distance from the mean, shown in the equation on the top. To find variance, you subtract each piece of data from the mean of the data, square this, and then add each piece together, then dividing it all by the sample size. Standard deviation measures the spread around the mean and is found by taking the square root of the variance, as seen in the equation below. To calculate standard deviation and variance in Excel, list each different piece of data in a separate cell. Enter the variance formula, which is equal sign VAR for variance, and then in parentheses your range of data. In this case, it was A2 to A101. To find standard deviation, I took the square root of my variance cell using SQRT, which is square root, and then parentheses with the variance, which was B102. But you can also use the standard deviation formula for this. If you were to write out this formula, it would look like this. I took each separate piece of data, subtracted it from the mean, and then times it by the frequency, which is a shorthand way. Instead of writing out each 0 minus 1.35 squared 45 times, I just times it by 45 and then did that for each different number, and then divided it by the sample size, which was 100. And then to find the standard deviation from that, you just take the square root of the variance. This pie chart is a graphical representation of our data. It was found by taking the frequency of each data point and dividing it by the sample size. Through doing this, we determined that the mode of our data was 0, which consisted of 45% of all of our data. Using the mean, standard deviation, and empirical rule, which states that one standard deviation from either side of the mean is 68% of the data, two standard deviations from the mean is 95% of the data, and 3 standard deviations from the mean is 99.7% of the data. We were able to create a bell curve or visual representation of normal distribution. As you can see, our data is not normally distributed because there are 3 outliers in our data, 6, 7, and 8. And also the majority of our data is at or around 0, meaning that the left side of the curve, or all negative standard deviations, are negative values that are not present in our data. This histogram is another graphical representation of our data. Along the y-axis, it shows the frequency or number of responses for each of the categories, and on the x-axis, it shows the number of out-of-state colleges applied to. This form of graphical representation most accurately shows the skew in our data and the fact that most of the data fell between 0 and 2. Ready.
The mode of our data set was 0, and you find the mode.